the BBC documentary that has been taken down after there have been concerns that they may have paid people in Hamas for the documentary, and apparently they removed references to Jews and jihad in the documentary. I haven't watched the documentary. I mean, it's now been taken down, so presumably I can't watch it. But yeah, there have been concerns, after we had so many cases of the BBC refusing to call Hamas terrorists. We had that report come out saying that they had breached their own editorial guidelines on the coverage of the war over 1,500 times. And now this, a documentary supposedly playing, essentially I get the impression is that this documentary played down the extremism of Hamas, maybe made them look somewhat like the good guys, and people are concerned, especially because the BBC wouldn't get the stick that it does if it weren't for the fact that license fee payers are the ones who are funding this stuff. They expect this channel far more than other Ofcom regulated channels to be independent, given that they're having to pay for it. And let's just have a look at this video you sent me, Kane. So we had a big protest outside the BBC as a consequence of this.
I was a member of Dobbs for 6 months.
So there we go. Huge group of people outside the BBC. Looks like they're protesting very peacefully there. I'm glad to see lots of people with their Israeli flags out, upset about clearly this and just the coverage of the war in general. Kane, what did you want to say about this?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's same old BBC. Quite honestly, why should we be shocked? Quite honestly, and it's just another nail in their coffin. And quite honestly, I am pleased nail in their coffin, because we shouldn't have a state national broadcaster in this country. We shouldn't be paying the license fee. It is absolutely outrageous that we have it still in this country, and that we even lock people up potentially for it. It's outrageous. But this particularly is just, it's sickening, isn't it? It's actually sickening that they would allow this to happen. That they're quite happy for it to take place, and they're covering up, the language of these terrorists, of these people who are supporters of Hamas. And then I just sort of want to flip it on the other side. Could you imagine if GB News, for example, they never would do this, but imagine if they interviewed, did a documentary with, far right, fascists and their children, and, went round to, estates or something like that, and interviewed these skinhead fascists and stuff, and covered up the language and did this and did that. Could you imagine the outrage? Could you imagine the situation? You'd have Keir Starmer on telly, you'd have the whole cabinet, out on the media giving comment. It would be the scandal that it rightly would be. But this, on the other hand, it will be swept under the carpet, it'll be brushed along, because it's the BBC. And the BBC are complacent, and I'll tell you why they're complacent, is because they don't answer to anyone, because they are nationalised. And this is the problem, nationalised industries, is they don't answer to anyone. They only answer to themselves. And this is the problem, because they don't have shareholders, they don't have competition. And at the end of the day, if they do something wrong like this, people can't vote with their feet or with their pockets or with their remotes, sadly, because even if you don't want to watch the BBC, you still have to pay for the bloody thing. It's absolutely outrageous. And what they've done to British Jews in this country is damn right terrible.
And it's a shame because the BBC, I think, used to be absolutely fantastic. They have produced some absolutely brilliant television over the years. You know, I know they're not, BBC News is not that exciting, but their television in general. You know, I grew up watching Doctor Who and all the rest of that's another whole thing that's been wokeified and is a mess now. But that's a story for another day. It's a great shame to see, and you're right that people, they can't vote with their feet and vote for their wallets. A normal channel, if they put money into a show and people don't watch it, they then do not get the ad revenue that they need on that show, and they realise this is loss making. We need to go down a different track. And if something has been portrayed in a way that is, the viewers are not happy with, then they're going to have to change track. But clearly that's not the case if you're paid for by a license fee. Just looking at this clip here that you see constantly playing on the screen, you see what's happened where they've translated things differently to the actual literal translation. So you'll see ready for jihad is the translation, the proper translation, but prepared for battle is the translation that the BBC have given. Connie, what do you think of that? Do you think that after seeing that twisting of the words there, you think that the BBC genuinely had an intention to make Hamas look like the good guys?
Well, this is what I've been thinking about this a lot, because I know it's risky saying it, but I don't know where I stand, because I do think the fact that they have mistranslated it, that is horrific, and I cannot, but it's unbelievable to the point where I just think that must have been a mistake. Surely there's no way that they have done that, but maybe I'm naive. But in terms of the biggest bit of the scandal, arguably, is the fact that the boy who narrates the documentary is a son of a Hamas minister. And it's only been discovered as a result of an investigative journalist. I can't remember his name, but I remember hearing him speak the other day. He was the one who revealed it.
So is he the narrator, actually, as opposed to just someone who's interviewed?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Because I was a bit confused, given I'm not able to see it. Now it's taken down.
Yes, so I've seen. Yeah, they follow him throughout. And he's the narrator.
Okay. Because I thought maybe this story had been a bit blown out of proportion if they'd merely interviewed someone.
I haven't watched it either, but that's what I've heard or seen, that he narrates the whole thing.
Okay.
I wonder what the reaction would have been if the BBC did exactly the same, had the same documentary, but said at the start, this is the son of a Hamas minister, and you're seeing it from his perspective. And this is what Gazans are saying. They're referencing jihad, and they're not saying Israeli, they're saying Jews and Jewish people. I don't know whether the reaction would have been the same, because I do think it's important that we see a documentary from within Gaza. Like there have been other documentaries as well. We see footage all the time come out of Gaza. That to me isn't the issue, the fact that it's a documentary in Gaza. I just think, I wonder what the reaction would have been if it was exactly the same, it wasn't mistranslated, and the BBC said that the boy was the son of a Hamas leader, so that then at least the viewer could watch from the perspective of, oh, these are the words of someone who's clearly indoctrinated into Hamas. And it does seem that, the mistranslation thing, maybe it's to hide the fact that there is so much support in Gaza for Hamas. I saw a vlogger who went to the West Bank recently, and he was interviewing Palestinians. I don't know if you saw that.
Yes,
I saw
did.
it on TikTok. And everyone he asked for, they basically said, no, that's not, Hamas are good. And even one woman suggested that Hamas holds elections. He's like, there hasn't been an election in Gaza for many, many years now, and she was sort of denying it. I don't have an issue with it as a thing, as it being a documentary for Gaza, but they should have been transparent about who it was, and it just does look like a complete cover-up. What were they thinking? Did they think that people watching it there wouldn't be anyone watching it who couldn't tell that the translation was wrong?
I think this is the interesting thing, and you're right, because if they had done what you're saying they should have done, that would be called journalism. That's being fair, that's being impartial, that's showing a perspective, but actually giving the context of this is this person, this is what they say, this is what they believe in. You make your mind up to how you view them. That's called journalism. What we've seen from the BBC is propaganda. And it's just, Ugly Boy has just said it exactly. They're playing the propaganda game completely. It is propaganda, and I also agree with you. You don't want to believe that it's true. You don't want to believe that the BBC is capable of doing this, but actually they are. They are capable of doing this, and we've got to stop believing that the BBC are impartial and that they are, they are fair and unbiased, because they're not. They are not anymore. They are not the thing that they once said they were, and this great beacon of Britishness. They're not that. They are not that anymore, and it's a shame.
I think that I know this sounds a bit like giving them benefit of the doubt, but I think it does partly explain what's gone on. I think I remember going to a talk with a BBC journalist, and there were questions being asked about the bias, and he seemed really, really strong in the belief that everyone that works at the BBC takes their responsibility to be unbiased very, very seriously. They see it part of their mission. I think that a lot of the time the BBC do think that they are being unbiased, but their idea of centre ground and unbiased is so skewed because they just live in a bubble. They live in the bubble of everyone that works at the BBC. They live in a bubble of people that only live and work in London. I don't think that they are in touch with reality. I'm sure there will be other staff there who do have a specific agenda, but I think a lot of them just don't really realise, if it's the case that all of your mates go on pro-Palestine marches every Saturday and everyone around you is saying that Hamas are freedom fighters, there are a heck of a lot of people that think that. I think that's a bonkers opinion, but there are. I mean, I was a student not that long ago. I still see the social media of my friends who are still very much in the student protesting era, and so many of them, they do think that Hamas are freedom fighters, and that they were just doing what they need to do to claim the land that's rightfully theirs. And a lot of people who live in this bubble, they think it's normal to celebrate Hamas. They don't see them as a terrorist organisation.
The BBC think they're being impartial because they get hate from both sides. So as long as they're being criticised by both sides, they assume they're being impartial. But the thing is, that's judging your impartiality only after you've released something. So it doesn't really work like that. So obviously now they've taken it out, we're not being impartial here because we've got loads of hate from one side. So that's not really... I mean, I heard someone else say that... someone in the know suggesting that that's how the BBC basically measures whether they're being impartial, as long as they're getting equal criticism from both sides, so that they're only acting reactively rather than proactively when it comes to these things. And now they've gone a bit too far and had to backtrack.
And that's always the argument of people who support the BBC as well. That's always the argument is, they get criticism from both sides. Both sides, if the far left hate the BBC and the right hate the BBC as well, they can't win. But it's just not the case. Okay, they get criticism, but they are fundamentally, like you say, they live in the bubble. They live in the left wing liberal bubble that is incorporated in London and in cities and in that doctrine. That's what they believe in. That's who they are.
Absolutely.